Genre Hustle, your virtual sci-fi fantasy writers group. I'm Anton.
I'm AP.
I'm Kate.
I'm Chris.
I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Carter.
And today we're talking about our critique group. What is a critique group, writers group, why they're important. This podcast is kind of an offshoot or came from our critique group, right?
Yeah,
AP?
we're all in the same critique group. We obviously know what a critique group is, but for those out there who don't or who need one, what is a critique group, everyone?
To me, it's a collection of writers and peers who are all kind of writing either like within the same genre or like somewhat associated, who are fans of the same sorts of stuff and who have enough experience as readers or writers who can read your submission, go over it with you, help you brainstorm ideas, and then and also like a community where you can establish trust between members so that you can go through the sometimes agonizing, brutal process of editing.
Always brutal, always agonizing.
No, it's delightful. What are you talking about?
And there's like a lot of different configurations of critique groups. This is the only one that I've ever been in for any significant period of time, but I've seen some other ones. So there's like online only critique groups where you submit basically over the internet and get feedback that's written, or sometimes they'll do Skype sessions. There's also critique groups that only do, say, full draft critiques where they basically wait until somebody has a novel. There's critique groups like ours where we use kind of like a specific submission format. We basically critique 10 pages every week. And there's like a million different ways that you can kind of design it based on who's in the group and what everybody's kind of aspirations are and time commitments and stuff like that.
But yeah, so it's like-minded individuals working together to improve as a group. And
I just comment on something that you said, Chelsea, because you said that people who are experienced, and I think it's also for people who don't have any experience, because I know, and of varying levels. There's some people that...
Well, I think all of us have entered the group pretty fresh.
Yeah.
And so I cut my teeth here.
Yeah. Yeah, I did too. But for instance, I've taken writing classes. Chris has an MFA.
Shut up. Well, but that leads us into talking about why are critique groups important? Why is it important? And you kind of hit on it right there. You know, if you're a beginning writer, if you don't have a lot of experience, you want to get better, the best thing you can do to do anything better is to get with people who are more experienced and who are better at something than you or know more about it. That's the best way to improve, the quickest way to improve. And I think we'll all talk about this during the course of the podcast, but I think we all have had that experience of being in this critique group and being around serious-minded writers has elevated all of our craft.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so how did it start, this particular group? I think, Kate, so you and Chelsea.
The co-founders.
Before we talk about the founding, I did want to talk a little bit about what Chelsea had said about the value of having people coming from like-minded genres. Our writers' critique group is primarily sci-fi and fantasy, and that's because there's so much overlap between these things, and we all like to read it, so we all have a lot of experience from that perspective, which then helps us to bring in, well, what do we like, what do we find valuable in what we're reading, and how can we translate that into our thinking process and our writing process to make what we're doing stronger and fit within the genre that we want to be a part of.
And since we're all fans of the genres, I think it just helps the excitement overall. Like I get excited when I see somebody's submitting traditional fantasy, which doesn't happen all the time. And it's something I can really dig into.
Absolutely. And I've definitely been in groups where it had much more of a literary style fiction or even essay perspective, and then tried to submit my sci-fi writing, for instance, and people just didn't have experience. They didn't read it. They didn't get it and didn't have any kind of perspective with which to go into and read what I was writing. So the critique was not at all valuable because I was not trying to be the next Jonathan Franzen, for instance.
But why not, Kate?
Yeah, the other thing that I think that genre familiarity buys you is that you don't have to explain things to people.
Yeah, exactly. People come in knowing the convention. So even when it's not strictly sci-fi or fantasy, if it's horror, for instance, AP, it'll be something that people are at least a cousin of or next to something, and people can get with it.
Bastard stepchild.
For sure. And there's so many overlapping tropes that you can then, okay, I get what you're trying to do here. I understand the subversion. Let's talk about how we can push it even farther.
And I think even because you get in with a group and it's like-minded people, if there's enough people in that group who want to do something else. For instance, there's a bunch of people in the group that do like romance novels. And so you guys have done, I know, like a romance critique group, which
Well, we've been
Have you
talking
guys?
about it.
that counts. Talking about it counts. Case in
It's true,
point.
but that cross pollination is nice. Like I can speak for myself. Like I have never even considered writing horror, but because Carter did Murder Park After Dark, I wrote a little horror story, which was super fun and awesome.
It was pretty good too.
Thank you.
It was scary. I think about it every time I eat eggs now.
Yeah, dude, that was a good grody story.
All right, back to Origins.
So I was at the first meeting, which was at the Whole Foods in Santa Monica, and it was like out on the patio area. So like I was already kind of out of my element because I had to drive really far to get there, and then I had to pay for parking, which is something I don't like to do. And so it was like, I think it was like 7 or 8 people, so myself and one other person who are still members, and we were all just reading our first pages of our novels aloud to each other. And I went in thinking like, oh my God, I am the shit. Like I am so the shit. Like I'm a fantastic writer, and yeah, no, I discovered very quickly thereafter that I was not the shit, and neither was anybody else at that meeting. So it was actually a really great experience because it's like, oh, okay, we can all suck together.
Yeah, right? It's like you don't have to be perfect going in.
You know, when you see that everybody who's there has a lot of room to grow, then it makes the process a little more relatable, because I think writing and sharing your writing can be very vulnerable.
Yeah, and certainly very intimidating. I came in, I don't know, probably a month and a half later. And I guess I should say that the group started on Meetup. That was how we all ended up coming together. I did a search because I was new to LA and was looking for people to kind of latch on to in this big, intimidating city, and thought writing was a good place to start. And so I found the genre fiction writing group that was mostly fantasy. Well, it was titled fantasy, but I thought, what the hell, sci-fi is close enough. I might as well give it a shot. And joined and met Chelsea through that, as well as some other people. But our original creator was basically an avatar. She never showed up to any group.
Yeah, we never actually heard from her until she wanted to start collecting dues.
Yes, in which case one of our fellow writing group participants made a joke of, well, I'll pay the dues when you show up. She then immediately stepped down as organizer, which within the Meetup structure would make the group no more. And so I decided, what the hell, I will step up and put forth the money necessary to keep it going. And that was kind of how I became the de facto organizer.
Yeah, and since we've seen your face, we feel comfortable paying you dues.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't realize there was that much political intrigue back at.
Yeah.
Oh, you have no
early
idea.
days.
This then ended up translating into a Cold War, I guess we will call it, between me and another woman who wanted to be the organizer. She desperately wanted this title, and it's like, do you want to put it on your credit card? Because if you do, then you can definitely have this. I don't really care.
And the interesting thing that I think that happened in that kind of early, within like that first year where we were still getting ourselves organized, was that we had almost immediate, like this kind of a breakdown in terms of vision, because your vision was, how do we, grow? How do we get in new members, and how do we keep things vibrant?
Yeah, and I think, how do we get a diversity of membership too?
Exactly,
diversity people from different levels of writing and different perspectives and writing different kinds of things. Where she was very much, she did not like my sci-fi writing, for instance, and she wanted to definitely keep it much smaller and much more regimented and with people that she knew. And I think ultimately,
we ended up with a better product, because here's the thing, you can't always rely on the same people to always go to the same thing. People move, people lose interest, people stop writing, like all kinds of things happen to where you may not be able to rely on the same group of people over and over and over again.
And that's a great point, because I remember when I first joined and I looked at the Meetup group and it had some 60 odd members.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, this is a legitimate group. Like there's a
Little did you know.
Yeah,
exactly
only
right.
about
I
12 to
soon
16
learned.
of them were actually showing up at any given time.
But that's an important distinction for anyone out there who's thinking about joining a group or starting their own group. Like you do need to get to that critical mass point of, like you said, Chelsea, 12 people or 15 people or whatever the number is coming every week or every other week, and that you can really kind of work with and build with.
And I think that's a good lesson too, if you're looking at it from something like Meetup. It can be really intimidating to Google a group and see that it has 120 members or whatever. It's like, okay, well, how can I possibly fit into that? How can I go into that? We're all writers. We all have kind of our neuroticisms and our anxieties and stuff. And sometimes that can be really intimidating, and it's hard to share something so intimate as you're writing with strangers, particularly that many of them. But a lot of times that's just kind of the window dressing. There's only going to be a certain number of people who are actually active.
Well, especially if that's your, like we said earlier, if that's your first step on becoming a better writer is joining a writing group. I mean, that can be scary. I remember when I decided to start taking writing more seriously, and I found you guys on Meetup. You guys were the second group I went to, and I remember going to that first meeting, and I was just like stressed out, and like Anton and Chris were there.
Ripped you to
loud.
shreds.
They ripped you to shreds. No,
You were very quiet. I do remember.
Yeah, no, it was very intimidating. But,
I still think the bravest thing I ever did was go to that first meeting because I was terrified.
Yeah, I remember when I first joined, it was through Meetup, and you guys had made a like questionnaire to fill out.
That's awesome.
Like, what is your experience as a writer? What are you working on? What do you hope to get out of this? That kind of thing. Introduce yourself. I think it asked for your favorite books.
Yeah, I had the same thing on Meetup. I remember that now. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that kind of thing is really useful for kind of screening people and making sure that, you know, your critique group is made out of, like Chelsea said, people who kind of have a similar background or at least similar interests.
Yeah, I think the other really important thing that it did, being where we are geographically, is it filtered for screenwriters.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, so that screenwriters were trying to come and be part of it, which is fine. But on the other hand, most of the group just didn't have any experience critiquing that kind of writing.
And there's also
its own
plenty of
discipline.
screenwriter groups.
There's no shortage of those.
Yeah.
And it is really a totally different craft.
Yeah.
So
Different audience. Different.
Yeah, and with different expectations and different, they're going in a different direction, I would say.
And just to jump in there, the questionnaire came after we had already kind of figured out who we were as a group. We had been functioning for, I think, about 2 years by the time that we had introduced that, and it came out of, the trial and error. There's going to be some people that don't necessarily fit in, and we also knew where the strengths of our current group and our participating members were. So we wanted to be sure that we were able to get more diversity just in terms of where people were coming from and how they were thinking about the craft and where they were in their experience, what they were reading, and so on and so forth. If you can only sit and talk about Tolkien or Star Wars the entire time, then you're
Kinda
only
like
going to
this
get that
podcast.
level.
I was just going to say.
I feel attacked.
That's the after show.
No, but that's a good
no one's
point.
singling you out.
Yeah, and I thought that was really useful, both because like from the internal perspective of screening people, but also it made me think about like what I really wanted, and like, is this like actually the kind of thing I want to get into? And I'm glad that I like decided that it was. And then like AP said, when I went to the first meeting, I was like really nervous. I didn't bring anything to submit the first
we
meeting.
weren't allowed to.
Yeah, you're not allowed on the first
I
one.
just
right?
came to check it out, but I remember being like, okay, yeah, this is like totally gonna like work. I suck way worse than everybody who's here, but hopefully I can kind of reverse engineer their talents and become better. And I think I did a little bit, so it worked out.
Well, to be fair, I feel like we lucked out a little bit in this group.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I think we've all experienced other groups, and
we've heard some horror stories from people who came from other critique groups too.
yeah, I think all things considered, this runs really smoothly.
Well, yeah, and I think like the key thing is the way that we run meetings and the kind of like, I think like the attitude with which we approach critique. It's like we try to make sure that, we're critiquing the piece, not the writer, using, I statements like, I responded to this way. This made me feel such and such. I wonder about blank.
So let's maybe give just a little synopsis of how we do run things,
that's
just so that everybody
if you're
who's
out there and
listening's
you
on
want
the same page.
an example of how this
So
can
what
work.
what we do is we kind of cap the number of attendees. So we meet about weekly.
It used to be every other week.
It used to be every other week, but that we had too many people coming because I think we were kind of creating like scarcity that didn't need to be there, and so everyone was like we ended up with like 16 to 20 people sometimes all trying to attend critique, and that's too many submissions. And so now we do weekly. It's 10 pages, Times New Roman, double spaced. It's always been like that.
1-inch margins.
1-inch margins.
Right, no fudging.
Size
No
nine.
fudging. Yeah.
Calibri, please.
Not Calibri.
Don't even get me started on Calibri.
not
the
Arial
font,
Narrow.
The font episode in season 4 is going to be fucking wild.
We have to bring Kate back for that because I got
50
called
minutes.
out.
Sorry, go ahead,
And
Excel.
so then what we do is at the beginning of the week, we just email everybody who's RSVP'd.
So the email goes out Monday for critique on Sunday with a deadline of Friday
by
noon. Right.
And so
And the reason is so that everyone has time to read them because
you need time to read because one of the expectations that we have is that everyone who's in attendance has thoughtfully read the submissions, because if I'm submitting and I expect the same level of care towards what I've put out there as what I've given everybody else. So
and the only reason I was jumping in on that is because I think as a participant, it's important to understand the time commitment. So if you've gone and you've written something and you've put the time and taken the care, you're submitting it, but you have to remember you're also getting 9 other ones back. And so that's 90 pages that you have to read arguably, between Friday night and Sunday morning. And that's a lot of reading. I'm a very slow reader. So, and you want to be thoughtful.
Yeah.
Which is also a big reason why we ended up going to the weekly pattern, because it ended up cutting down the number of people that attend every week. The sweet spot, I think, is probably about 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
6 to 7 people, 5 to 6 submissions.
And then in terms of how we structure feedback, there's a lot of different schools of thought on that. The way that we kind of do it is, we encourage written feedback whenever we can. We actually like leaving comments in the document of
Right.
the
Not
person's
required,
submission.
but preferred.
Yeah, not required, but kind of recommended. And there's like specific things to focus on. And a lot of times when people submit, they'll say something like, hey, this is a rough draft. I'm really just looking for first impressions, what you think of the character, where you think the story's going. Or somebody will be like, I've been re-editing this book and I have specific questions about this and this and this and this. And so we kind of try to focus on the feedback that each person is looking for, as well as giving, kind of helpful notes and our impressions on it. Always trying to be positive. Like one thing I really love about our critique group is that it's very, it's never demotivational. Like even when I submit something and it gets like torn apart, so to speak, it's never done in a way that makes me want to stop writing it or stop writing in general, God forbid.
Yeah,
so
you got to have there's a responsibility when you're in a group and reading other people's work that, as we've talked about, you be respectful, of course, but you really should, if you're going to like take part in one of these groups, if you want people to respect your work and your professionalism and what we're all striving for, you really got to give that back to people.
yeah.
One thing that I think is really interesting about our group is, so I have done MFA, I've done a lot of like critique groups and whatever, and so normally, probably most of the time, and they go Iowa style, right? So which is the writer presents their work and is not allowed to talk during the critique. So we don't do that. We talk back all the time,
Which is fine.
Well,
Too much.
Yeah.
We leave it open to the writer to decide. There's definitely those among us who decide not to say anything when they're being critiqued. And then there are others who are maybe a little bit more talkative back than they should be. But
Yeah, and
it's all what you need.
And I think that's something to really watch out for when you're being critiqued, because it's very easy to slip into a defensive tone and posture.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And look, it's a vulnerable process. We've all been there. It is hard to watch people talk about things. And I would say, if somebody is misinterpreting something, then go ahead and be like, in the last chapter, I explained that she has magic. And so that's why it's doing that.
Right. And
But
if they
then
weren't
also,
sorry.
yeah. Oh no, but then also listen, like if somebody is confused, you might not be conveying it the way that you thought you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got. I mean, if more than one person is saying the same thing, there's a good chance that it's legitimate. But that is the other side of the coin here where like, so most of us are writing novels most of the time. We do short stories and stuff. But you get 10 pages of a novel, there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's not there.
Yeah. Or so, was there a week ago or 2 weeks ago and they didn't read those submissions.
And it sounds difficult to do, and it is, but I think, doing submissions, it's actually a skill, critiquing, that you can learn. You can learn to get better at critiquing other people's work as you get better at doing your own writing. And I think the more you do it, the more you sort of like immediately know, okay, this is chapter 9 of this novel, so I'm not going to worry about
how did they get here,
or like you're going to focus on the words on the page.
But going off of that, another thing that the writing group does is we do beta reads. So yeah, we have the weekly submissions, but it's also a format and a structure for completed pieces. So we do beta reads. Yeah, so everybody can submit a complete novel. Hopefully not a first draft, usually second draft or third draft.
Yeah, ideally the first draft would be during the critique sessions and piecemeal. And so that's sort of the alpha read of it. And then as you go through the critique process, you strengthen it and tighten it here. And then you get to a certain point where, well, guys, you really need to have read the whole thing because I've given you 8 different versions of this one thing. So here you go.
That sounds familiar, Kate.
I'm not speaking from experience, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind a beta read is similar to like beta testing a video game or something. Is it should be as done as you can make it without getting comprehensive feedback.
Right.
And that's what we try to do, I think.
And that varies for everyone. The farthest that you can go may be a little bit different from the farthest that Chelsea can go. And you adapt from there. You just need to set certain standards before people can submit. Otherwise, you'll be inundated.
And the beta reads follow the general format of the weeklies in terms of you have to submit, and it's not obviously the Monday before, but they'll set a date kind of 3. Yeah, you have 1 week to read.
Couple of months.
You have 2 weeks, 700 pages. But
like
you guys,
a month and a half.
You get like a month and a half, and it's capped at 2 or 2.5. If it's a short story, just 2 novels and a short story. But there's some reasonable number.
1 novel.
One novel now, yeah.
We're at 1 novel now.
We just changed that.
And then
speaking of trial and error.
But okay, going back real quick to the weekly. So it starts Sunday morning, 11 o'clock. It goes to 2. And so you know that you're going to be there for 3 hours. So it's important that, it starts on time. Everyone's friendly. We say hello and stuff. And then we start, and everyone has 15 minutes. And there's literally a stopwatch. There's literally a clock that goes off. And at the end, any last comments? No? Okay, who's next? And that's good because otherwise it keeps everyone, in the time box, and everyone gets their time to speak and the critique. And it's nice going in knowing that.
The other thing that's nice about like that 15-minute window is, I guess not nice, but something you have to be cognizant of as an organizer of these meetings is to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak, because some people can get very passionate about their commentary, and then it's important to try to look out for tangents, look out for people saying like, oh, well, this book reminded me of this book.
Yeah, that's a thing.
And that's not like that's actually not a very helpful comment. Don't tell me what it reminds me of.
Or one person will dominate the whole conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know who that person could be.
I don't know.
Or you keep harping on the same thing, like people are saying the same thing over and
or
try
you
and
repeat
find
whatever they say.
Yeah, you try and find yes, Anton, you do. No, but always try and find something different in the piece that you're critiquing. At least that's what we found works for us.
Yeah, and that's why doing written notes is really helpful too. Like even if you aren't comfortable giving written notes to people, I feel like you should always like kind of have a dialogue with the text when you're reading it to critique it. You should come to critique knowing ahead of time what you want to talk about, what advice you want to give, or what issues you want to bring up, and then if other people already talk about it, just say, yeah, I agree. And, you don't
and move on, right?
Yeah, if nothing else, it's notes for you, and it helps you with your own editing because you're essentially doing...
Yeah, you're reading as a writer. Yeah.
And line editing for someone else's work, so you're doing it for yourself.
And something else on this point, we use more of a conversational structure. And so everyone is able to jump in and kind of build off of each other. And we have a dialogue about each submission. But there are certainly other ways of doing it. I've been in groups where the writer kind of sits there and doesn't say anything. And we go around and each person offers their critique. And it's not so much as a conversation as it is kind of a report. And then you can maybe have a discussion afterwards. we experimented with that in the early days. It didn't really work for us because of the more social structure that we had kind of adapted and the personalities in our group.
Right.
But that's something else for you to consider if you're starting your own writers group.
Yeah, exactly. That's just what worked for us. So
Yeah. Collaboration has its pros and cons. It can you can sometimes get kind of muddied feedback depending on the perspectives that are being offered to you. But if the feedback can be more collaborative, then things can start to clarify.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in one, Kate, which is the same one where you go around in order and you're not allowed to repeat anything that anyone else has said.
Yeah. And so then you're the last person. You end up, yeah, it was good.
I actually had the opposite experience where people would get to the end, or I would be at the end, and the first thing is always, oh, yes to everything that everyone else has said. And then you have to really be thinking kind of, okay, I have to come up with the 8th thing that's about this story. And
so here's this really nitpicky little
sometimes,
criticism.
or you have to dig deep. And it's anyway. I'm just saying that's probably further out.
There's a million ways to do it. I think it really depends on the group, and like we found, I think, a really good rhythm with the sort of the core members of the group that have been coming for years consistently.
Which is not to say
us.
that we don't have to jump in on occasion and say, okay, like let's take a breath. You hold that there, and so someone else can have a chance.
Absolutely.
Anton, stop interrupting Chelsea. That sort of thing.
That's right.
Every once in a while, the gavel has to come down. But
Well, let's talk about troubleshooting. So as in any group that's open to the public or whatever, like, you can do it different ways, but like we've had some difficulties like with personalities and stuff.
Absolutely. And I think, a writer's group is sort of like anything. You need to have some kind of leadership. You need to have some organization structure coming down, top down, in order for it to really continue to move forward and continue to grow. It's nice to have a democratic feedback, but ultimately you need someone making the decisions, and someone that people can come to and say, look, I'm feeling uncomfortable with this person, or the last critique was really difficult for me because of this, or I think we need to look at this thing and reevaluate how we're doing it. And sometimes you act and sometimes you don't, but it's important to get that feedback and have someone that your crew can come to.
Yeah, you have a responsibility to create a safe space.
Exactly.
If you're getting
said.
people together in one place and you all have a common goal, and you're the organizer. That's kind of up to you to moderate and to ensure that everyone feels comfortable.
Yeah, and part of that I think is developing trust
Exactly.
within the group and within the members, like within the membership. And part of that is being an active participant and submitting your work and showing up and being consistent. Is now, like, you see me active in the group, you know that you can come to me with issues, and you know that I'm not gonna go to the person who you're having an issue with and be like, Anton says that you're doing like, no, I won't.
We're harping on Anton a lot today.
So and no, we have had interpersonal issues, and
I think, just to jump in there real quick, Chelsea, being an active participant as an organizer and going to as many sessions as you possibly can and having a relationship with as many people in your group as you possibly can allows you to start to identify and see where there might be some pain points that need to be addressed, particularly if you are bringing in new people, whether it's from the public or it's from member recommendations. Right. You can get a sense and feel if people fit and if they don't. And then it's up to you and your organizing team to start to think about how you can address those issues.
Yeah, so then you have options. Obviously, if you're doing your own group, you can meet with a person who's potentially problematic, discuss with them kind of like what you've seen, behaviors to address and possible solutions. On the other hand, like, some people can feel very, very attacked by that kind of criticism, where it's no longer about the writing. Now it's about, their personality or their characteristics or something like that.
Yeah,
Their
conduct.
style.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to pay attention to interpersonal conduct within the group, because you are trying to preserve an atmosphere of trust and vulnerability and respect. if you honestly do have a person who, to me anyway, like if you have a person who's honestly just being problematic and making it so that other people don't feel comfortable showing up, or they will make arrangements to get around that person.
Yes, if you bring a new person in and then all of a sudden attendance starts to drop off the cliff, then it's something that you need to start to look into.
And it is okay to ask them to leave.
But we've talked about some of the ways of getting around that. So, for instance, we talked about in the critique, you make it about the work, and you don't you don't talk about them as the writer. You talk about this writing thing that you came in too early in the act, or the sentence like you talk about the writing, not about the person. So we always talk about critique versus criticism.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly. And I think the thing is that for 90% of people, that usually works. And I'll even admit that I feel, anxious and sometimes scared when I bring things to you guys, and I've been doing this for a minute. But there will be people who will feel personally attacked. And the thing is that you can take steps that are reasonable to make that person feel more comfortable, especially if they're new. But if it becomes a problem where they're always reacting as if they have been personally insulted, now you have a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Or if they aren't able to distance themselves from the work enough to take critique. Receiving critique is almost as much of a skill as giving it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that can come in a lot of different forms. Like, for example, it's really important if you're in a critique group and you want to get better, you need to be able to accept criticism and critique and actually do the work to try to improve your writing. It doesn't mean just bringing it in for feedback. And if you're going to do that and then ignore what everyone says, then you either, don't respect the people in your critique group or don't respect yourself enough to try to make your work better. And so I think that that's a big thing. And then also during critique, it's important to not be defensive. Explaining things is one thing. Like explaining where you come from can be useful, especially in the kind of conversational style that we have. But you never want to, if somebody says, I don't understand the character's motivations, you don't want to respond to that by oh, well, obviously he's going to do it this way or something like that.
Yeah. And you just don't get me.
Yeah.
And, we all have our bad days, and sometimes you're more open to that than others, but it's just being self-aware enough to be able to take a deep breath and step back, or having people in the critique group that you're close enough to that can kind of look at you and say, dude, you need to chill. And it's just,
Well,
you can also put up a boundary during critique and say, with this aspect of the story, I'm not interested in changing it.
Sure.
I have had to say that to people who I think either interpreted something the wrong way or just zombies are so done, Chelsea. I'm not interested in changing that aspect. So please think about something else.
Kind of going off of this a little bit, I think part of what we're circling around is that starting or joining a critique group is to improve your own craft. So you have to, there has to be a certain level of maybe not professionalism, but taking it seriously.
Expectations.
So you have to understand what your expectations are joining. This isn't a social club, even though social things may arise out of it. And some of my closest friends are part of this writing group now because it's been such a great experience. But I joined this group originally to improve my writing. So I need to be able to understand that I'm growing. I need to be able to take the feedback that's being given to me. And if you're joining a writing group, you need to take it seriously.
Yes to all of that.
And I was going to say it's about expectations. So expectations as a would-be writer coming in that I don't want to say you have to have a thick skin, but you have to sort of let some things go, I guess is what I want to say. You have to go, and you can be anxious, you can be nervous, but you have to, if you're going in to be a better writer, people are going to need to read your writing, and you need to be able to accept things. And then as a member of the group, you have to know to give feedback and keep it focused. And these are skills. Carter, you said it. You have to be able to learn these, and some people are better at it than others coming in.
So I look at it this way. This is the first hurdle, the first line of pain that you have to cross as a writer. So
one of the many.
But so you're sitting in your room for years writing your things. You think maybe it's pretty good or maybe it's not, but bringing it to a critique group is the first sort of step, I think, that in a writer's sort of getting feedback and really figuring out what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. there's no other place that's going to be as supportive.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, the next place to go is like you're sending to agents and publishers
Right.
and fucking people online.
Right. And they don't care.
And they're not going to be
Yeah.
supportive necessarily all the time or even give you the time of day. So it's like it's a good place to sort of cut your teeth as a writer and as a learning your
and a good
skill.
middle ground. I don't want people to come away thinking that we're all sunshine and rainbows.
Absolutely not,
We
no.
definitely have really tough critiques sometimes, and we definitely hold people accountable and push people to better their work and to think about things in different ways, and have even said, I don't think this thing is working. I think you need to toss it up a bit. And so we're not your mom, we're not your best friend, but there's still a supportive atmosphere and we're all in it together. And I think that's the most important thing, is we're all kind of on the same page.
Right.
And if you look at the fantasy and sci-fi writers that are out there, almost all of them to a writer are in a writers group. That's how you know this. If you want proof that this works, just look at anybody. If you have a writer and you look them up, I guarantee you they're in a writers group.
Oh, it has to be essential, I think. Like when I look at things that I was writing back in like 2015 before I had joined this group, it's like night and day. And I don't think I'm great at writing by any means now, but it's insane how rapidly I improved and how much I learned that I would have never been able to pick up just from reading and writing on my own,
Yeah, just do it. If you want to become a professional writer or if you just want to get better, it's the best thing to do. Join a critique group, find a critique group, make your own critique group, do what you got to do. But yeah, like what Carter said.
Don't write into a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, no.
If you want other people to read it. I mean,
Yeah.
Which is
like,
the point of
you know,
writing, by the way.
Well, no, I mean, yes, but it also, there are people who do it and don't really want to put it out in the world. I mean, there's lots
But
of
that's
people.
journaling, isn't it?
Oh, Anton.
Something else.
You sweet summer child.
I mean, look, I did plenty of writing that I hope no one ever reads.
Yeah.
Because, for whatever reason, I was processing. Probably, I am a lesbian, so.
Anton doesn't have emotions like that. He doesn't
I know.
understand that.
Yeah. Whereas, like for me, it's all emotions all the time. But yeah, like this is it's basically the best way and also free. The free way to level up your craft. Like there's a cost savings too, because Clarion is how much money?
Right. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to get in.
Thousands of dollars.
$1,000,
and you have
hard to
quit your
get in.
job.
6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a
Or
really
like any
intense-
writing course costs money, online or otherwise.
And
Which
so, like-
which are also very valuable too.
I
I'd just
agree.
like to
I
add.
But so I think there's the question of, well, how do you find a writer's group? If you don't want to go through the process of creating your own and trying to find people to join it, how do you find one? And I think there's a lot of different options. Meetup worked for most of us here. I think all of us around the table came from to the group from Meetup.
Yes.
Yeah.
Though we're not on Meetup anymore.
Though we're not on Meetup
Right.
anymore because we decided that we liked our group the size that it was and didn't want to have the social
Yeah.
setting of that.
So now we're doing new members by referral only. But yeah, I think that it also depends largely on where you are, and like the hard truth of it is that I found this group, which is an amazing critique group, almost immediately after I moved to LA. And, in like 6 or 7 years of trying to write fiction in Indiana, I never found anything approaching like a serious critique group. So
Did you go and look on Meetup, or when you were in Indiana, did you look for groups?
No, I didn't look as much, but
I think that there are other ways aside from Meetup. So you can also
Right.
look at your local coffee shop may have some, your local bookstore may have postings.
The
but
library.
The library may as well, but there's online based critique groups for sure that you
Right.
can join.
Right. I was going to say that, like, maybe joining an in-person critique group is unrealistic for some people out there. There are a lot of online places you can search. There's writing websites and forums that you can go to. Reddit I see posts
fantasy
on
Reddit.
there all the time where people are saying like, hey, do you want to join like a writing group Discord? And then you get into a Discord server with like 10 to 20 people, and they do like weekly submissions, and yeah, it's not in person, but you're still getting the same contact and experience.
Yeah, and writing Twitter is a big thing. You could probably find a community through Twitter
That's
as well.
true, actually, yeah.
And also, I mean, starting your own critique group is a totally viable option. I mean, this group never would have existed if Chelsea and Kate hadn't done the work to make it what it is. And I think that, that's something that anybody who's really got a strong organizational spirit as well as a desire to,
Not
And
everyone has
patience.
that. Yeah,
Lots
exactly.
and
That's a lot.
lots
That's a
of
big skill.
patience.
lots of patience.
Herding writers, not unlike herding cats.
Yeah.
Well,
Because believe it or not, writers never read the small print ever. Ever.
And sci-fi fantasy writers can be a little strange. I know that's weird to say.
A little
but
strange.
to go back to what you were saying, Carter, even if you want to start your own group and you're somewhere where you don't think there's a lot of people who write in the same genre as you do, even if you find one person to be your critique partner,
Yeah,
that's
and
valuable.
I think you might also be surprised too. Again, think
true.
about your local library, your local coffee shops, your local bookstore. You go in, you see people at their laptops, regardless of whether you're in Los Angeles or Kansas City or, the middle of England. There are people out there who are writing, who are passionate about the craft. And if you put yourself out there, you can find them.
All these novels come from somewhere. But yeah, we got really lucky with our writers group.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So tell us what we know everyone can't be as lucky as us, and we're very thankful and blessed. But what we would love to hear, we love dishing, so we would love to hear what your biggest critique group horror stories are. So why don't you tweet those to us at Genre Hustle? So thanks for sticking with us, and hopefully you got something out of this, and you'll start your own critique groups or find your own. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.